So, Lorraine, if you could just share with us, what should people do if they're not getting any response to their job application?
Yeah, this is definitely a frustrating experience for a lot of job seekers. That's probably one of the biggest things that I hear, right? Is I'm getting ghosted, I'm not getting any kind of responses. What do I do? So I understand this is very frustrating and it's a common problem for a lot of job seekers. So I think the first thing that we need to recognize is that a successful job search does not rely on only one method. So, for example, you might be applying mostly online to job boards. That's really the most common method right now. And that's okay, but that's only one way to apply for a job. And it does have a very, very low callback rate, right? It's very impersonal way to apply for a job. We don't always know what's happened to our resume when we submit it into cyberspace, right? So that strategy itself is only one way. So if that's all somebody is doing, my advice is going to be to vary your method. So really try to get in touch with a person, whether that's the recruiter or a hiring manager, but also just in touch with your network. We can come about job leads through networking, asking for referrals, recommendations. As we kind of get into this interview, I'm going to talk a lot more about all these different job search strategies and how you can generate job leads in different ways. It's not always about applying only online. So I think my basic advice would be try something different. You need to vary your methods between networking, maybe even career fairs, applying online. There's a lot of different ways that we can come about a job opportunity and try to be seen and be visible in a job search.
That's great. What way I when you say that, what I hear is people need to represent themselves like a company represents itself. Multiple channels
Yeah.
of promoting yourself via the online search, your resume, going to the job boards, and like a company,
Yeah.
if you want to go after a certain customer, you go where the customer is. So
Yeah.
just like a person, you want a job, you need to go where the job is. So not only on LinkedIn or Indeed or SCM.jobs, but also you need to show up on their job board, put your resume there.
Absolutely. If you had a product that you're right. If you had a product that you were selling, you would want to reach your customer in as many ways as you possibly can, right? You would want to promote it through different channels. Absolutely. So in a way, you can kind of think of it as a sales campaign, but it's really about visibility. Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a good metaphor.
Yeah, and when I talk to folks about, some other folks that I know, it's like, hey, you got to be everywhere, and
Yeah.
not just there is your job, but you have to be interactive. And I think you mentioned that, and you will mention that as we go into the interview. And
Mhm.
so I really appreciate your time this morning to talk about what people need to do when their job application isn't working. And just for everyone as you joining us, what we're going to do with this interview is give you specific actions to take right now. That's why we're going to go through our conversation with Lorraine, and she'll get an opportunity to introduce herself here in a second. And so that you understand the process and how to best interact with that process to get the most successful result for you and your career. Make sure that you subscribe, like, and hit the bell to be notified of future videos like this in the future, because we will be interviewing Lorraine in the future with other topics, as well as other career coaches out there to help you get into the job application process, job search, and ultimately to find that career. As well as, Lorraine, if you don't mind, I know who you are, I know your background. If you don't, just share, how you are, and what people can do to connect with you. And I'll go ahead and show our banner as well. And so people can learn more
Yeah.
about
So
you.
yeah, a little bit about me. So I'm Lorraine. I'm the owner and CEO of Career Uprising. So we have been in business since 2015, almost 8 years now. And we work with mid and late career professionals to help them make career changes, which is really a life change, right? Changing jobs or even changing careers altogether. So we do coaching, we do resume writing, LinkedIn profile writing. We even do assessments to help people figure out what their next move is if they're not sure. Sometimes we're 45 years old and don't know what we want to be when we grow up, right? That's actually pretty normal. So we can help you figure out a target and then figure out a plan for how to get there and how to land a fantastic job. So you can learn more about us at careeruprising.com.
Perfect. And I'm Randy Malden with SCM.Jobs, and we are the place to go for your supply chain career. This is where you'll find resources, job opportunities, job boards, and career resources, just like Lorraine, to help shape
Mhm.
your job, your career. And that's one point I want to make before we really get into this. This is, you don't want a job, you want a career. You want to build a brand, a personal brand that enables you to have a stream of opportunities always coming to your inbox. And so that once you land this job, after Lorraine tells you how to get focused and take action right now, is you got to do this all the time so that you're not that person when they come around with the pink slips or the notifications. You're not in that group, or even if you are in that group, you've already got 5 or 6 other people that know you're available and how good you are. So, and we'll talk about that at a different point, how to bulletproof your resume or your career. And Lorraine's teed up to do that at a later time, but it's definitely going
Mhm.
to be a good time to really bulletproof your career and make it a good time. So
Mhm.
with that, towards the end of this interview, Lorraine's going to give you a free resource, a video course on how to work with your career as well. So, but we'll talk more about that at the end. And what we want to do right now is get into this interview with our first question. And our first question, let me go ahead and bring this up, is what should you do if you're not getting any responses to your job application?
Mhm. So I think one specific thing that you can do here is the most basic thing is to take a look at the resume and the LinkedIn. There's some really common, simple, easy to fix mistakes that I see that can improve callbacks on applications. So starting with the resume first, make sure that it truly is targeted to the job you are applying for. The more specific, honestly, that you can be, the better. So take a good look at the job description, scan through for the keywords and what is the core of the job? What is the problem that this job solves, right? Because you are a problem solver. That's why you want to fill this position. So make sure from just a basic keyword standpoint, but also the core components of the job, make sure that comes through really clear on your resume, especially at the very top when you typically have a job title or a headline. That's that first impression. So the first third of the resume on that first page, that's the first impression. That's what they see first, and that has to speak directly to the jobs that you are applying for. And then same thing with the LinkedIn. I see a lot of mistakes with LinkedIn headlines. The LinkedIn headline is the first thing besides the photo that they see on the profile. And I see a lot of really unique and creative LinkedIn headlines out there, but they're not aligned with the job that the person is applying for. That's a problem. That is definitely a problem. People, like a recruiter, for example, is probably not going to click on your profile to find out what you do. You need to tell them what you do in that headline. So it's basically about first impressions, right? Making sure that that's a meaningful and targeted first impression. So if you're not getting responses, first take a step back, take a look at your documents, maybe even have somebody else take a look, somebody else more objective, and say, here's the job I'm applying for. Here's what I'm putting out. What do you think? Would you hire me? Does this look relevant to you? Is it clear what I do from my resume, or is it a little bit ambiguous? That's the first starting point. Then when we dig a little bit deeper, we want to look at your job search strategy. Perhaps you are only applying for jobs online and not doing any networking, or not connecting with any recruiters, or not necessarily targeting any specific companies that you are interested in. There's a number of other methods that you could put in there as well. But I think the first thing that you can do is really make sure that there's a clear connection between the resume and the LinkedIn and the jobs that you are applying for, and not just the job that you've been in, but the job you are applying for, because sometimes that's a little bit different when we're making a little bit of a career pivot. So we have to make sure that we have our target in mind when we give that first impression on the resume and the LinkedIn.
That makes a lot of sense. And just to kind of dig into your response there, the first thing you mentioned was your keyword. Your resume needs to be targeted towards a specific job. And a point there is that you have to be found first. That your resume is not a document and that doesn't change, right? It's a dynamic document that needs to change based on the position you're looking for or applying for at that moment. Is that a fair, that correct?
It is. And the one thing I want to speak to that is a big frustration for a lot of job seekers is a lot of people say, well, I'm spending hours and hours and all this time tweaking my resume endlessly over and over. That shouldn't be necessary. Okay. Some customization is necessary. Yes, because sometimes we might apply for something that's essentially the same job, but it has a slightly different title or just emphasizes slightly different skills. That's a quick fix on the resume. However, if somebody feels like they are constantly, and I hear this a lot, rewriting their resume for every job, that tells me you're probably applying for too broad of a range of jobs. We shouldn't be fully rewriting our resume or even really the cover letter over and over for every job. That's not a good use of your time in a job search. You should have one resume that I would say works for the majority of jobs with some customization needed for some that might be a little bit different, or maybe just a slightly different level, but the same job, or the same job but called something a little bit different, right? But we shouldn't be rewriting our resume endlessly over and over. That's a red flag that something is probably not aligned or your job search is too broad, which is another really common mistake that a lot of people make.
What it sounds like to me when someone's doing that is they don't know what they want. They are in what I would say is panic mode. They've been given the notice and now they're on the job market with everybody else and they're just applying, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier is career management, knowing what your career is, what your path is, where you're headed. And then it allows someone to build a resume that drives that result that they're looking for. And so whatever position they're in today, they should have a career plan. That's your career strategy that you offer when you work with someone. Where are you headed? Where do you see yourself in 5, 10, 20 years? And so if you're in the supply chain, if you're a buyer or a contract manager, your next level should be a senior buyer or a senior contract manager or a director. And now you need to start building experience that goes in your resume that speaks to a position like that. Is that fair? Is that
Mhm.
really what we're talking about?
Absolutely, absolutely. You want to know who you are now and where you're going, at least for the next position. You don't necessarily have to have the next 10 years figured out, right? I don't have that figured out. That's okay. But for your short-term immediate goal, you do need to have clarity on that. Because I hear a lot of times, well, I'd like to do this, but I'll take this, or I'll take anything. And you
Right.
don't really want to take anything. What you mean when you say that is, I need a job quickly. But truly, you want a job that you're aligned with, that at a company that is a good fit for you, something that advances your career, but you do want it as quickly as possible. And sometimes we're in a position where we need to get income fast. So of course, sometimes we have to take a stepping stone or a bridge job, and that is perfectly fine. But as much as possible, we really want to be shooting for what we really want and targeting ourselves for that. Because if we just apply for everything, we're going to get nothing.
I think it also speaks to what you also mentioned previously was networking, always
Yeah.
networking, and especially in this day and age when everyone's online, you're not really with people. You have to
Yeah.
make a deliberate effort to get out of the house and get in front of people that provide opportunities for you. That's professional networking, professional associations, conferences, events, not just people at your company because they know who you are, but they also are not necessarily the ones that are going to give you that next opportunity. So
Mhm.
networking is critical. Any thoughts on networking, what people should be doing there?
Yes. So there is one specific starting point, one activity that I give my coaching clients. And I say the first thing I want you to do is make a list of your top 10 to 15 connections. So people who know you may be former bosses, former coworkers, even friends and family, people that you feel comfortable, kind of that low hanging fruit, right? Here's
Right.
the first small crop of people that I feel comfortable reaching out to, sharing my job search with, people that I think will pick up the phone and maybe help me a little bit, right? So start, and if 10 to 15 feels large, I say start with 5. Start smaller. Some people will say 10 to 15, that's no problem. I can give you 25. I love that. But if they don't say that, I say, okay, that's fine. Start with 5. Do you know 5 people you could reach out to this week and share what your target is? And I have actually a specific framework, if you want me to go into it, that an acronym that I teach clients when networking so they know what to say.
Okay.
So we can kind of get into that in a second. But the first thing that you need to do is take an inventory of who is in your network. Who do you know? Because a lot of times we don't realize we know people who can help us. We do. Until you actually look and go through your contacts and go through LinkedIn and survey, who do I know? Where do they work? Who do they know? We don't really know the power that might be there. You know, as a business owner, I'm connected to people that could absolutely refer people to me. I just don't know it. Like if they don't know what I do and I don't ask and nurture that relationship, they're not going to think to refer people to me. So I have to do this process myself constantly. And it's something I didn't learn until I became a business owner. I didn't have a career coach like myself when I was searching for jobs. So I didn't know all this. But that really is the first step. So take an inventory of your network and start small if you need to. Start with just a few people, make a list, and people that you feel will reach out to because you want to build your confidence up if it's something that you're not very confident with.
And I think it also, we talked about before, is, you know, you run your career like a business, and you just mentioned it. You're, as an entrepreneur, you know what to do to network, to build your business, and you're doing it all the time. Right. Even when you're on vacation or out, you always got an eye out for that next opportunity. And people need to do the same thing. They need to build their career like a business. And this is a constant networking thing that they must do. And one thing that I thought of when you mentioned that is now is not the time to be prideful. And I say that meaning you need to let people know you need a job or are looking for a new opportunity on LinkedIn, your friends and family, and not say, you know, when they say, well, how are things going? Everything's fine. I'll be good. It's the recession. You say, well, you know, I'm always looking. And the simple way to say, you know, I'm always looking for an opportunity. You know, that way they know that, hey, he's open. So if they'll think of you and keep an ear out for you when there's an opportunity, and they'll say, well, what do you do? And then you have to give them, you know, that career focus, where you're headed, what you're doing. But as a business owner of your career, you have to constantly network and have a strategy and everything else that you get when you work with a career coach like Lorraine. So that's definitely something we want to do. So this kind of leads us into that next question. We've kind of been talking a little bit about it, but that next question is, you know, what are some of the common mistakes job seekers are making when looking for a job, especially right now, coming out of COVID or looking at the pandemic, or even considering the economy and the state of the economy right now? What are those mistakes that people really need to think about and learn from this interview so they don't make them as they get out there?
Yeah, well, so I think we did talk about one in terms of not being targeted enough in your approach, right? Applying for everything. So we know that we don't need to be everything to everybody. We don't want to just take anything. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing would be failure to really show your transferable skills. And this is really important for our military transitioning as well, because they have a lot of transferable skills, but they don't always know how to show them. And especially going into supply chain, that's typically one of the fields that really does translate actually quite well out of the military. It's fairly straightforward, but we still have to have a great resume. We still have to show these are the skills that I have. So one framework that I teach clients, both for when they're interviewing and for on their resume, there's a couple different acronyms out there. I like CAR: challenge, action, result. Okay. So when you are writing the bullet points of your resume, and when you are answering interview questions, I want you to use that formula of what was the challenge, what was the action, and what was the result. This builds really good resume bullet points that show your skills, that show your quantifiable achievements and your problem solving. And this is what a really strong resume has: is specific accomplishments, quantifiable achievements when possible. Not every line of work has really quantifiable achievements, but even if it's not quantifiable, I want you to provide a specific result. So I hired and trained 5 entry-level employees that went on to become managers, something like that. That was one thing that I had in my career. I hired and trained a lot of employees from the lowest level that ended up becoming managers of their own centers, and I mentored and trained them. That's an accomplishment of mine as a manager. So that's something that you want to talk about in interviews, and that's something you want to put on your resume, because that's a really transferable skill. And so I think a lot of people fail to really show that in a clear, compelling way. They write bullet points that are very generic, kind of very flat, and don't really have a specific result, because employers don't just care about what you did, they care about the impact of what you did. What was the result to the business? Did you make more money? Did you save a client? Did you hire and train people? Did you improve quality and processes? How did you improve the business? That needs to come through loud and clear, both on your resume and interview responses. And I think that is one thing that a lot of people don't either know how to do or don't feel confident doing, because they feel like they're bragging. Like you said, it's not the time to be prideful right now. We have to go ahead and feel confident about sharing our successes and doing so in a really specific way. So I would recommend that people try that framework, brainstorm some career stories, challenge, action, result, and you'll get a lot of really good examples of your skills that you can use.
And I think what you mentioned there is you mentioned that business owner, what they're thinking. They're not only thinking what you did, again, this sounds harsh, but they don't care. And it's true. I mean, I went through that experience when I came out of the service. They didn't care about my 20 years of service, my education, and the things I did in the service. They're thinking, what can you do for me and
Yeah.
my business to help me grow? So that transferable skill is that, okay, you did that for that company. That means you can do that for my company.
Yeah.
Or in the military, you did all these things in the military, transitioning, you led people, you managed, you solved problems, you brought calm to chaos and accomplished a mission. And now that's something going into a recession or an economy that's kind of going to be volatile, like it's going to be in the next few years. You're going to bring calm to chaos, and you have to be able to explain that. So the business owner, and that's one of the mistakes I made, is how would I translate my skills to that business that I want to work for? Not what did I do, but what value do I bring? And can I articulate it well?
Yes.
And that if I cannot articulate in a way they understand, then they won't get it. If you're talking to military people, they get it, but you're getting out of the military. Or if you're in your own company now, you talk to those people, they understand because they were with you, but how can you articulate that going on the outside? Any insight on how working with a career coach helps somebody make that translation? Like we say in business, get out of your own head. You need to bring in consultants,
Yes.
because
Yes.
you know your problem, you know how to solve it, but can that really translate to somebody else? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a couple of things. So one, so working with a coach it can provide that outside perspective, and people will often see you in a way that you don't see yourself, and that's really important. And I'll give you just a really quick example from my own career. I remember applying for a promotion that I did not get internally at a company, and I was young and it's okay. I tried for it several times. It wasn't meant to be, but the feedback that they gave me, this was kind of trivial feedback in a way, but I always remembered it. The interview, she said, "Do you know how many times you said the word absolutely?" She said it was about 25 times. And I had no idea that I was repeatedly saying this word over and over. And it might have been a nervous thing. I don't know what it was, but I always remembered that, because the point of that is that you don't realize things until somebody sees you and gives you that feedback. And that's so valuable. We think we're coming across one way and we're not sometimes. So I share that story with clients a lot because I have to do it too, right? I have to get feedback about myself as well. And I always remembered that. So I think one, a coach can share with you feedback about yourself that you may not realize. And that is a good thing, right? We want to be open to that. But the other thing is if you're not good at something, outsource it to somebody who is. I do that in my business. I have people help me with my social media, my marketing, because I'm a coach. That's not my strength. So if writing is not your strength, or if interviewing is not your strength, have somebody help you do it. You'll become better at it and you'll get better results in your job search. And I think it's really important for military folks as well. There's two groups of people where I say, you really want to find a coach or a resume writer that has experience in your field. Military is one, and technical people is another, because there's a lot of language. There's kind of a different world a little bit involved with those lines of work, that it's really helpful to have a coach or a resume writer who has worked with those types of professionals and can help you make that transition. So for example, on my staff, I have a technical resume writer who does nothing but write for people who have technical skills, because that is her background and that is what she does. And then I also have another coach and writer who comes from a military family and specializes in military and federal resumes. So I keep on my staff people who have these specialties because they are so valuable. So as a job seeker, whether you hire somebody or have somebody else help you, make sure that you are outsourcing things that you are not good at so you can learn and be better and get better results. And I've had, as a coach, I've had so many coaches. I've always got somebody coaching me as well.
I think that kind of brings a point of you're good at your profession, your specialty, supply chain management, for example, and that if you are really, really good at doing the job interview and searching, it means you're always looking for a job. That means you've got a lot of experience doing that.
Yeah.
And so again, bringing in a professional that knows what they're doing, it just makes a difference. And that's one of the reasons for this interview, is to give people tips and tricks on how to stay ahead, but then realize what you don't know.
Yes.
And try to find the resources that you need to help. And Lorraine's one of those resources. And so, definitely reach out to her and we'll give you some more information towards the end on how to do that. So let's consider the next question. The next question is, how can you make your job search more efficient and effective? So learning from our mistakes, how can we kind of start to bring it into a process or something that we can make it efficient and effective? Because we're still hopefully have a job, or if we don't have a job, we need to find a job quickly. So it needs to be efficient and effective at the same time. So some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would recommend, this is an exercise that I do with my coaching clients, and something that I did when I was always job searching in my 20s. You need to document your search. So kind of like you said, Randy, about treating it like a business, I almost want you to treat your job search like a project, and you're the project manager. So I provide my clients a spreadsheet, just a simple Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I've made with certain tabs on it. And you can make your own. Of course, there's nothing really fancy to it. But what I want you to do is I want you to document your job search. So I want you to keep track of your applications. I want on one tab, I want you to keep track of your networking efforts on another tab. So you can figure out, who have I spoke to? Who do I need to follow up with? And then I also want you to keep track of any companies that you are interested in, because when in a job search, there's 3 things we can do. We can target specific jobs online. We can target people in our network, and we can target companies that we are interested in. So that's basically like a third, 3 strategies, right, that roll up into a successful job search: companies, people, and specific jobs. So make a tab on your spreadsheet for each one of those and track all of your activity and your efforts. And it sounds cumbersome. It only takes a few minutes. If you do it each day, it's 10 minutes maybe, or you could do it every other day, depends on how much you're searching. But I want you to see what is working. So I did this when I was a job seeker, and I would keep track of my applications. And what I was able to see was, how many jobs am I applying to? How many interviews am I getting? What kind of companies are calling me back? Is it the bigger ones? Is it the smaller ones? Is it a certain industry? If knowledge is power. So if you don't know what's going on in your job search, you don't know what to change or fix. Just like they say, you need to know where your money is going. You need to have a plan and keep track of your money. Otherwise, it's just going out the window, right? And you don't know what you're spending it on. So same thing in a job search. To be efficient, I would open up a spreadsheet and start tracking it a few minutes every day and logging your jobs, logging your network, so you can see what is working and what is not.
And when I heard you say that, one thought, activity does not necessarily equal productivity.
Right.
And by tracking, you will then be able to see what's working so you can do more of that, and what's not working so you can stop doing that. And that's especially, I would say, is when we think about social media. People are, I'm on LinkedIn, call me, right? I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So what? There's, what is it, 3 billion people on LinkedIn. How do people find you? And even then, so if you're on LinkedIn all day long, posting the jobs, interacting with people, well, is that activity equaling productivity that leads to a job? Or is it just activity to where you feel, well, I was busy all day, I was on social media and I did all this work, but then what result did you get? What are your thoughts on that?
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. That's a great way to sum it up. And that's one reason why job boards are good, but they're just one tool, right? We want to also network. We want to also maybe even do some cold outreach to some companies that we're interested in. We want to also try to connect with recruiters or staffing agencies. Right there, there's 4 strategies for a job search. So, and then there's networking with your own people that you know. So yeah, I do absolutely think that you need to pay attention to not just what you're doing, but what is coming from what you're doing. For example, some clients will be giving applications out and not getting any interviews, but some are getting interviews, but then they're getting bottlenecked in the interview process, right? Maybe they're getting a lot of first round interviews, but not getting called back for a lot of second round interviews. That would tell me something's going on in the interview process. It's not the resume and the cover letter. So one common question that I ask clients a lot is, are you getting interviews or not getting interviews, or are you getting interviews but not offers? Because those are 2 separate problems. And that's something that having that spreadsheet and tracking it will tell you. You can look at it and go, wow, I've had 8 companies do a phone screen with me, but none of them call me back after that. That's the interview. That's not the resume.
Right.
So that's one reason why it can help you to diagnose what's going on.
Absolutely. That's great. That's a great comment. A process, right? People can think through processes. Now they're starting to see that there's a process to this. And this is not a process you can start overnight, meaning you get the notification and then the next day you're trying to put all this process into play. You've got to, again, think of a career strategy, a career focus, where you're headed, and have all this stuff in play, because nothing stops the clock. Once we all get older, the job comes and goes. Kids coming, everything happens, life happens. So you have to be ready. So you have to start building these processes now. And it's an investment of time, and it's an investment in working with, people that know what they're doing. And so by reading, the video course that Lorraine's going to provide us at the end, is going to help us with that. So, make sure, you're watching this interview, stay to the end to get that free resource so that you can leverage it and start to learn what you need to be doing right now. Does that make sense?
I agree. Definitely.
Okay, let's move on to the next question here. So what should you do if you're not getting any responses to your job application, despite having a strong resume and a cover letter? So you've worked with career coach, you have the right resume, you're getting good advice, and you got the right cover letter, and you're doing everything you feel is correct, but it's not working. What's going on?
Yeah. So like I said, a lot of times the clients will come to me and say, I'm not getting any interviews. I don't understand. And they assume that it's the resume. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have a good resume and you have a good LinkedIn profile and you're applying for the right job. But the problem with online applications is they don't always even get viewed. We don't know for sure if your resume is even getting viewed by a human. So this goes back to varying your strategy, okay? So if one strategy is not working, we don't want to just keep doing that over and over and hoping that it will work. We need to pause and reassess and say, okay, how else can I get in touch with these companies? Maybe I can come up with a list of 10 or 15 companies that are in my industry that I'm interested in and send emails to them. Find somebody on LinkedIn that I can target and reach out to them through LinkedIn or through email. Or maybe I need to sit down with my network and have some more conversations and ask them for some recommendations of, are there companies that you think that I should apply to? Or is there somebody in your network that is hiring, something like that? There's other approaches we can take. Or maybe do I need to go to a career fair? Maybe do I need to get out of the house and go to a networking event? Or do I need to look at maybe registering with a staffing agency? There's a lot of different ways that you can apply for a job, but we've all gotten so comfortable kind of hiding behind our computers sometimes that we forget job boards are good and they're easily accessible. And some people do get job boards that way. And I think that if you're going to be on a job board, being on a niche one, like for supply chain management jobs, is a great idea, because at least then you can kind of cut through the noise and get right to jobs in your industry. So I think that's a great thing that you guys are doing. It's focusing it down a little bit so that people's time is better spent on a job board. So that's another strategy, is maybe come off of some of the large broad job boards and find a niche one in your industry. And that might help you be a little bit more efficient as well. So there's a number of things to do, but basically the answer to that question is, if something's not working, do something else. Try a different strategy.
So how much should I try my strategy or follow my strategy before I consider adjusting the strategy? In other words,
Mm.
how many job applications should I put in to realize it's not working
That's
to begin
interesting.
with?
Well, I mean, I could just kind of throw a number out there. I mean, I've certainly had clients tell me I've been looking for a job for months and I've applied to 100 jobs and I've gotten no interviews. That's way too far.
It's a little
We've
far.
gone way too far at that point, right? I would even say a lot less than that. If you've been applying steadily for jobs for a month and maybe you've applied to 30 or 40 jobs and not gotten anything, that might be a problem. Typically, what I see as far as applying online for jobs, the callback rate is usually a little less than 10%. I usually got about 10%. So for example, if I would apply to 20 jobs, I usually got about 2 interviews. You're not doing too bad. If that's where you're at for that strategy alone, you're not doing too bad. So if you're less than that, if you're getting like 0
Right.
callbacks
Yeah.
and you've applied to 20, 30, 40 jobs, let's do something else. Certainly.
Right. That's good. We give them a number, okay?
Yeah.
2% or 10% conversion rate. 20 interviews should
1% is
equal
a good
to
target. Yeah, that
20
would be
applications should equal 2 interviews. So if you
something
put
like
in
that.
20 applications or you connected with 20 people and you're getting no feedback, you are doing something
Yeah.
incorrect. And again, think about as a business, right? Your time is valuable. As businesses, we're writing checks, right? We're writing checks to advertisers or social media or doing that kind of stuff. But as an individual, your time is valuable because you're working, you have family. That's your investment is time. So you have to think about, am I spending my time, my investment wisely? And what am I doing? Activity again doesn't equal productivity. And one of the things you mentioned in there I thought was really interesting. You said register with a staffing agency, and that brought to
Mhm.
mind, you talk. There's been in the media about the Great Resignation. What people
Yeah.
aren't seeing is the other underlying part of that is what companies are doing as a result of that. And what they're doing is they're hiring people as contractors, and then if they do really well, they'll give them a full-time job.
Mhm.
So when you think about a staffing agency, what is that about? What can people do?
Yeah. So working with a staffing agency doesn't necessarily mean contract work. It can, and I've been placed successfully twice in my earlier career with staffing agencies. Now, some agencies will do contract work, some will do contract to permanent, some will do permanent W-2 positions. So you need to just kind of talk to the recruiters and find out what kind of positions they have. But usually a staffing agency is free for you as the job seeker because they essentially work for the company and that's who they're representing. But it's not a bad strategy for you to have a conversation with them, upload your resume into their system. When I did it, I actually got to do an interview where they would find out what my skill set is, and it was more than just uploading my resume. I actually met with them, and it worked absolutely. So do a Google search for staffing agencies that are either in your area or even just in the industry that you are in. And you should be able to do it for free. There are headhunters out there, I think, where you can pay a whole lot of money. Most people don't need to go that route yet. You can just register with them, get in their database, have an initial conversation, and that way you are a little bit more visible. Because the nice thing about staffing agencies is they typically have jobs that are not posted other places. So that can help you get into the hidden job market. They don't want to post it other places because then you're going to find it and apply somewhere else and then they can't represent you and then they can't get paid. So it makes sense that they're going to have access to hidden jobs, as we call them.
With
So I
multiple
think this is
companies, right? With
what's
multiple
that?
companies.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. And because
staffing agencies are, I mean, the title kind of tells you they're a staffing agency which works for multiple companies, staffing
yep,
multiple companies. So
yeah.
that hidden job market is inside there. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I didn't want to lose that point.
Oh
Like,
no, that's fine. Yeah, so they don't just work for one company; they have multiple. So that gives you even more exposure potentially, and you're not obligated to take anything that they bring to you. But the nice thing is, when they do bring you an opportunity, they help you. They coach you through the interview process because they want you to get the job,
that's how
right?
they get
That makes
paid, right?
sense. They're incentivized, so they coach you through it. They prep you. They tell you all about it. They kind of advocate for you through the process. So it's it won't be successful for everybody, but if it's free, it makes sense to use that as another one of your strategies in addition to applying online. Definitely.
So this actually really segues well into our next question, which is how do you effectively work with recruiters, staffing agencies, recruiters? And because you mentioned they advocate for you. Why do they advocate for you? Like why do they? Because that's how they get paid. And that's where you mentioned before, you pay somebody to find a job for you. No, consider working with recruiters, building a relationship, because they get paid for putting you in a position. And if they work with you,
Yeah.
then they're going to get paid. So that's why having a good resume, a good LinkedIn profile, you'll get recruiters contacting you. So kind of walk us through that. How can you work with a recruiter?
Yeah, well, I think we have to have the right expectation. So a lot of recruiters get a bad rap, and people get really frustrated with them, and it's understandable. I've been a recruiter for many years in my life, so I understand more than some job seekers might what's going on behind the scenes and behind that process, right? But if you've never been in the hiring process, sometimes it's kind of hard to understand why aren't they responding to me, or what's going on. But I think the important thing is to remember they're not there to find you a job. They work for the company. However, it's still a good idea to build relationships with them, have conversations, add them to your LinkedIn network, because they will remember you and you will be searchable. And if you are a match for something that they have, they will work with you throughout that process. They will advocate for you. That was the experience that I had several times. Every time I would go interview, they would call me afterwards. How did it go? Okay, here's the next step. Here's what you should emphasize in your interview. They know that client really, really well. And it's always great to have that support. So they will advocate for you if you are a match. Now, a lot of people get frustrated because they want recruiters to advocate for them up front when they haven't even determined if they're really a match for anything yet, right? So that's kind of the problem. We have to manage our expectations with that relationship. But staffing agencies are one way to find recruiters, but there's also in-house recruiters. So that's a recruiter who works dedicated for that company. And so they're an employee of that company, not an agency. So they only recruit for their employer. You can connect with them as well. So I would, again, pull up that list of 10 to 15 target companies that you are interested in and do an advanced search on LinkedIn, especially if you have the premium, you have a lot of additional search capability, and connect with people who are recruiters at those companies and start a conversation. And remember this, in any relationship, you want to add value. It's not just about me, 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 me. It's about adding value to them. So what would be valuable to a recruiter? Well, referrals. So when you start the conversation, you don't necessarily have to say, I'm so-and-so looking for this type of job. You can, but you can also say, I'd love to connect with you and learn more about the positions that you're recruiting for, just in case myself or anyone in my network might be a really good fit at some point. Would you be open to a 15-minute call? And I'd like to learn more about what your positions you have open. Something like that, right? Add value and offer to maybe fill another position for them if you have somebody to refer to them. That is going to be super valuable. Now you're speaking their language. Now that's their currency, right? Is finding people. So always when you're networking with recruiters or anyone, think about adding value and having a two-way conversation and relationship with them. And I think that will help.
And I think you mentioned referrals for our military audience. You have a whole connection of network military people who have transitionable skills. So when you call that recruiter, you already got a whole bank of people to talk to and help them, but you don't know how to help them until you understand what they're looking for. And it could be any recruiter. And I think Lorraine nailed it. You're adding value. And by adding value, you're now exchanging value, and it's going to work for you as well as the rest of your network. So they'll continue to keep an eye out for you as well. So I think that was a great point there. Adding value is important. And especially, the military is we tend to believe that, everyone, well, he was in the military, we have all these skills, but again, those skills don't translate into business value until we know how to translate it into business value. So we have to take away our pride, be humble, and realize what we don't know, and talk to a recruiter. And as you hear the words they're using, then start to translate those words into what you do or people do, so that we can all start to speak the language of business, which is not the military language. Does that make sense?
Yeah. There is a little bit of a different language in there sometimes. So give yourself time, give yourself an adjustment period. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think language is key.
Yeah.
Language is key. Being able to translate your skills into something else, which then kind of, as we're kind of seeing things, how can you effectively follow up with employers, recruiters? What's that follow-up process look like?
Yeah, I think so. So if you've had an interview, you always want to end the interview getting an expectation of the timeline and what the follow-up is. So make sure just basic things. Have the contact information for the people that you interviewed with, set an expectation for follow-up. So what are the next steps? When can I expect to hear back from you? Okay, if I don't hear back from you by that time, I'd like to follow up with an email or something like that. Set some expectations, get a timeline, make sure you're also connecting with these people on LinkedIn that you're interviewing with if you haven't already. And just kind of make sure you're putting it on your spreadsheet and following through when you say that you are going to follow up. But the biggest thing that you have to remember too, and this is what's really, really hard for people, is when they do that, they get ghosted for whatever reason, especially if after they've interviewed. But even if it's just a recruiter you've been chatting with, if somebody isn't replying to you after one, maybe two follow-ups, you need to move on. We don't want to keep giving our time and energy to someone or something that isn't responsive to us. That's not a good use of time. And then we just look super, super eager, right? And there's nothing really wrong with that. I want you to be interested and engaged, but don't keep following up with people that don't reply to you. It's only going to make you more frustrated. Move on. And if they come back and say, hey, sorry, I've been gone, we are still interested in you, great. If you're still interested, then work with them. But in the meantime, don't get frustrated. Don't live in that space. Don't hold up your job search because you're waiting for this recruiter to get back to you and you're checking your inbox every day for it. I used to be that person, which is why I say that. But I think people get really disillusioned and get frustrated, especially with recruiters, because they don't always hear back and they're waiting and hanging on that. And it's a habit we need to break. We need to give our time and attention to things that are working and things that people that are responding to us. And if we hit a dead end, go ahead and move on. And if it reopens, great. But if not, in the meantime, pursue another lead.
Hey, so, yeah, like you said, move on with people that are willing to move on, and professionalism. Do you really want to work with somebody who's not going to follow up or be available to follow up with you for that? And I think the other part is just move on. And what's a reasonable follow-up time? Is it like 3 days every day after the interview, or is it like 3 weeks, once a week, and continue to follow up? What's reasonable?
I think it depends on what the time frame is, right? So after you interview, you want to ask them, how long should I, or when would I expect to get an answer? Respect that timeline, whatever that is. From there, when that timeline passes and we don't get a response, yes, absolutely, go ahead and do a follow-up. And then I would probably, if you still don't get a response, I'd probably wait a week maybe, and maybe do one more at the most. And then we gotta let it go at that point. And that's the hardest thing to do, right?
Let it go.
But if it's a dead end, it's a dead end. We're not, we can't make people reply to us, but we can choose who and where we put our time and energy to.
So this may be a good point to kind of discuss the process of hiring. What does a hiring manager inside a company, what is that? What's going on behind the scenes that may force somebody not to follow up or may do something? What's going on behind the scenes that
there's a lot of there's a lot of things that could be. Quite honestly, sometimes it's just the recruiter gets busy and they literally cannot follow up with everyone. They might have a lot of work. They have multiple requisitions open at one time. And sometimes something's got to give. And when I was a recruiter, I tried my best to reply to everyone, but I know there are some people I just couldn't get back to that email. It wasn't that urgent. And I had all these other things that I had to get to. Sometimes that's what it is. And it is what it is, but we can't always reply to every email. Sometimes it's not worth re-engaging because we can't move forward with them for some reason. Sometimes, employers don't want us to give negative feedback to candidates. So maybe somebody isn't progressing, something in the interview didn't go well, they're not a fit. Some companies have different policies about giving that feedback. Sometimes employers want you to just kind of let it die. Some employers give that feedback, right? Employers sometimes are hesitant for legal reasons to tell people why they didn't get a job, right?
Right.
It depends on what it is. And it doesn't necessarily mean that discrimination is happening. It just means that it opens up a can of worms and re-engages with somebody that isn't going to move forward. So that's different companies will handle that differently. And I'm not advocating one strategy or another. I'm just saying different companies have different cultures and different ways of handling candidates in the pipeline and ones that don't move forward. So sometimes it's because you didn't get selected. Sometimes it's because they're really busy and they just haven't gotten to you. They just have other priorities. Maybe the requisition totally got canceled and they didn't hire anybody. It could just be an oversight. There's so many things going on. That's why we can't spin our wheels and worry about it. We can't.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, and that's why I wanted to kind of make that point. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that we just don't see internally, legal reasons, other reasons, whatever. You just don't worry about it. You put your best foot forward. You did everything you were supposed to do in the way you knew how to do it. And 2 weeks at most, if that, just move on. But never ever stop your job search either. If you went through an interview and you thought it was good, and you feel that you're getting, even if you are getting followed up with, and they are kind of, telling you, hey, we think you're a good fit, continue to look for other jobs, because you may be down to 2 candidates. You're one of 2, and they pick the other person. Now you have to start over. Never stop. Keep going.
I always say that the job search continues until you have accepted an offer. Absolutely. And even then, yes,
that's my opinion.
Even then, I've had a few candidates accept jobs. They're like, well, I just got an interview request. Why not? Go through with it. Why not? You haven't started the other job. You can be transparent too and let them know, I have accepted another job. I haven't started. I would love to still connect with you. I would love to still see if potentially I could be a fit for now, whatever. You can be transparent or you cannot. That's up to you. But I would take the interview. Personally, interviews are hard to come by. Why would we turn them down as a job seeker? If there's something, if you're not committed and started. So that's a good point. You should, even then, until you day one and you step foot in the job, right?
And what I would offer there is even then, because companies, when for example, when the recession, you can look at the news, how many people have been laid off in the last few months, and I say, big companies, famous companies, Twitter comes to mind, 20,000 people have disappeared. Is they make decisions based on numbers, and you have to constantly, again, operate your career as a business. Think of what's next, and you have constant interviews. Always be available. It'll keep you sharp. It'll keep your skills sharp, because you're always thinking about that next position, that next opportunity. The company may come in one day and say, hey, I'm sorry, but you didn't make the cut for whatever reason. Therefore, we got to let you go. And you're like, no problem. And because you're always working it. You're always working it.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to our last questions is, how can job seekers maintain that positive attitude and be pleasantly persistent during the job search, even when they've had this type of experience, they're not getting a follow back or something like that?
Yeah. This is one of the really big challenges, the mental piece, right? The mental and emotional part of a job search, because it is mental and it is emotional. It's not just about going through the motions. It's your person, right? And you're bringing your whole person to this process. So job search fatigue is real, definitely. Sometimes we're okay in the beginning. We've got some energy and some inertia and we're good to get started. But after 2 or 3 months of not getting results, it is really, really hard to keep going sometimes, and to keep the faith and believe that there is going to be a job out there that will say yes. But the mantra that I teach my clients is the right job will always say yes. Just like I know in my business, the right clients will always say yes, because I get, quote, rejected all the time, right? From people who are interested and do a call with me, but then they don't sign up for whatever reason. And that's fine. I just know that's not the right client for me, and that's okay. So I want you to go through this job search process knowing you only need one job. You have a sales quota of 1. You can do that. So if your sales quota is 1, you only have 1 slot to fill. On your journey to getting to that 1, you're going to get all the others, or most all the others probably will be no's. So just expect that. Don't view it as rejection. Expect it to happen, that you will encounter a lot of dead ends, and it's just part of the process. It's part of learning, readjusting your strategy, and getting good at job searching and figuring out what you want and what you don't want. So stop seeing it as rejection. That's a choice. We don't have to look at it that way. We definitely don't. I do not feel like I'm rejected when people decide to go work with somebody else besides me. It just means it wasn't a fit, and that is okay. So I would definitely reframe the rejection piece of it and know that the right job will say yes. And then I think the last thing I would say is if you really are getting burnout and getting job search fatigue, you can take a little break. Not a long one, but pause. Do something else. Okay. Take 1 week off and do something for your mental health. Get out and have fun and go talk to family and friends and change it up a little bit so you can hopefully come back refreshed with a new mindset. But it will, if you are getting really jaded in your job search, it will show. It will show in your conversations and your interviews, and you don't want that. So take a pause for a brief amount of time if you need to.
I think by saying it's that you get feel jaded, and it shows that people need to understand that yes, you do need a job, but if people see that desperation and that type of things, that they may feel that on the other side. And remember, you're one of several candidates. So if you have that feeling or projecting that out and somebody else is not,
Yeah.
then that it could be equal in all ways. Everything's lining up, but they just have a better feeling about this candidate versus that candidate, and then they would go with the other one. So taking a break is
Yeah.
worth it, as well as, again, hitting it back, career management, knowing where you're going. And you mentioned that before, knowing what you want. You have to know what you want so that you go and talk to the right people, and you're
Mhm.
not wasting your time. So
Yeah.
definitely very good. Great interview, Lorraine. I really, really appreciate it. I think we've offered some very good value to people watching this interview today. And now I'd like to kind of give people the opportunity to learn how to work with you. And I know you've got this career video course that you have
Mhm.
available for people. So let me bring it up real quick and kind of show it and keep it at
Yeah.
there. And if you don't mind, just kind of tell us a little bit more about this course and why, or what people would get, what benefit they would get by being involved in this course.
So what absolutely. So when you join my community, you're going to get instant access to what I call the career change roadmap. So this is a free video training that I developed a couple of years ago that has been really fantastic for giving people a high level overview of where do I begin? What are the steps to a career change process? And you can apply the process that I teach you to any line of work. So no matter who you are, how old you are, how many gray hairs you have, or where you come from in terms of the industry, you can apply this process. Or I got a few, right? You can apply this process, definitely. Okay. So it's going to go through 3 high level steps of how do I change careers? How do I get from where I am now and then bridge the gap? Because that's really what it's about, right? Bridging the gap between where I am and where I want to go. And I like a checklist. I like a process that helps my brain kind of
Yeah.
know where I'm going. So you're going to get those steps in this video.
And I think it's good for our military audience because they are definitely changing careers, right? They're coming out of a different culture, a different experience, and they're going into a different culture altogether. So this video course will be very helpful to help people, in the military transitioning out. And even then, as we get older, we tend to change jobs. I don't know what the statistics are, but around 39, 40, and we're all
Yeah.
39 forever. People tend to just change careers because they've been doing it for so long. And so it's time to do something. So there's another reason to get involved in a training like this. And it doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
You're investing your time, and that is expensive. And Lorraine's asking you to invest some time, but I feel the return on your investment is going to be phenomenal. It's going to give you some focus. It's going to give you where to go. And in addition to that, we also have our free resume review at scm.jobs. Just go to scm.jobs, and you'll be able to upload your resume, and when you upload your resume, get that resume reviewed by a professional, which will give you another set of eyes. And then when you work with a career coach like Lorraine, she'll give you another set of eyes on that career. And multiple opinions are good, but you have to know what you want, and you have to get started by getting that resume out there and getting things going. So hopefully you've enjoyed this training. Definitely subscribe, like, and hit the bell to get notified of future interviews just like this with not only Lorraine, but other career coaches in other career fields that can give you an advantage in this turmoil or this volatile economy that we're getting ready to go through. Look in the description. Not only did you see the links on the screen, but they will also be in the description so that you can go ahead and connect with Lorraine. She'll not only have her career course out there, but I also want to put up the banner again about how to connect with Lorraine. And if Lorraine, what is the best way to connect with you? what is the absolute best way? I know you have your website, and your email, but I'm sure you get tons of emails. But what's the best way for people to kind of connect with you and learn how to work with you?
I would probably say LinkedIn. That is where I have the biggest following and the biggest presence for sure. I'm not spread real thin on a lot of different social media sites. I have a YouTube channel, but I'm mostly all in on LinkedIn. So if you just do a search, I believe I'm the only Lorraine Rice that you're going to find, the only one I know about. So I should be pretty easy to find. Yeah. So just search, or you could probably search career pricing too, because I have a company page as well. You can find me either way. But yeah, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn, and you can follow my posts. I have a newsletter, Get Hired Over 40. That's free. You can subscribe to that as well. And I have a LinkedIn group also. So there's a lot of things you can do for free on LinkedIn.
So definitely connect with Lorraine on LinkedIn, and it just connect, start to build your network.
Yeah.
She'll get to know you. She'll know who you are. Start to look at your resume or your LinkedIn profile, and that'll tell her a lot as well. And so, take this opportunity. And the whole purpose of this interview is to give people clarity on what to do right now and what actions to take. We've given you some insight into the interview process, the hiring process, and we've given you definitely some key insights to take action on right now to do things. And you need to take action right now. Don't wait until you get that notice you're no longer employed here, or whatever. Don't wait for that to happen. Take action now to be prepared for it. And the other thing I tell people is, like I said, your company will lay you off at any time. You need to be willing to lay the company off at any time. If they're not supporting your career, they're not giving you advancement, they're not hitting your salary expectations, they're not doing the things, you should be moving forward up your career path the way you want to, not necessarily the way the company wants you to. Because if you're a great buyer, for example, and you buy really well, that company sees you as value right there. And if they move you and promote you, then they have to fill that gap with somebody else who may not be as good. So that could be another reason why they may not get you moving up the chain of command that you want to go, because they think you're doing really good right there. So you have to control your own career and do things that way. So as we wrap up, Lorraine, any parting thoughts?
Absolutely. No, I'm just going to agree with you. Take action now, because I do get a lot of people who come to me after the job search hasn't been working for 6 months, and now they want help, and we can help those people. But then I also get the people who, like you say, are, I'm still in my job and I'm still okay for now, but I just really want to be proactive. And I always applaud those people, and I say, yes, this is the time to do it. You will not be disappointed that you have got your documents up to date, you got the advice, you're ready to go. So one's a proactive, one's a reactive. And I understand people want to try it themselves for a while. But if you try something for a while and it's not working on your own, you need to get help for sure, for your own benefit. So absolutely take action now.
And Lorraine is an expert, and she mentioned before, she works with lots of people, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but she knows other career coaches as well.
Mhm.
And to where if you're a better fit with another career coach, then she may know that career coach that you're a better fit for. And well, she has other people on her staff in lots of different ways. So there's definitely a good reason and a benefit for connecting with Lorraine, going through that video course and learning more about how to work with her as well as other career coaches. So with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and we will see you next time.